Hi, I'm Sam Fessich from the EduMagic podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, as always, thank you so much for making My EdTech Life what it is today. Because of all of your support, all of your views, all of your listens, thank you so much for all the shares too as well. We're really excited to be back here. I know we had the weekend off because we were doing some UIL stuff here in our district, but I'm sure glad to be back. And especially right now during the week where I have an amazing guest. We've got Mike Rutherford, who is joining us this evening, and we're going to be talking about AI. We're going to be talking about gotLearning, growth over time, and who knows where the conversation will lead. But I'm really excited to have Mike here joining us. Mike, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. I've been watching your show for many years, so it's kind of exciting that I'm actually on it. So
Yeah.
I'm very honored.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And that really actually that sounds so cool, to be honest with you. You're the first guest to say that, but saying I've been watching you for many years and the show's been on for 2 years plus, and to hear somebody say that is really cool. So thank you, Mike. I really appreciate your support. And I also, as always, just being able to connect with you and have you here on the show. So that's exciting. But let's dive right in, Mike. I'm really excited to chat with you. We had a great little chat here in the pre-chat area. But before we get into all of that, Mike, if you can, please give a little brief introduction of who you are, where you're from, and just your context and education for our listeners that are out there watching or are going to be hearing this episode later on.
Okay, excellent. Well, I just recently moved to the East Coast from the Bay Area, and now in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The reason we moved here is my wife's job because she's also an educator as well. And my background is that from coming out of university, I became a teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia, and taught eighth grade civics. And right at the time, they started opening up new positions for instructional technology coaches. And I applied and became one of the first 12, or really 24 technology coaches. I had 12 schools that I worked with, which is basically bigger than the average school district in the United States. But I did a lot of driving, and I learned a lot about the whole K-12 technology spectrum on the instructional side. Eventually, I became a district technology coordinator at a smaller school district up the street called the City of Manassas Public Schools, which is also in Virginia. And I was there for a few years, all during the E-rate and the buildup and computers flowing into the classroom. Really super exciting times. The World Wide Web was coming in. We had T1 lines. It was like, oh my gosh, we have this great fast internet connection. We got rid of the modems. It was really cool. And after a few years, I wanted to do a little bit more and kind of got caught up in the late 1990s and the dot-com run up. And I knew there needed to be some kind of software that helped teachers with their classes on the computers, and whether they're using computer labs or we had computers inside the classroom. And I contacted a company that was in the same city I was in near Washington, D.C., called Blackboard, which was one of the first LMSs in the higher ed space. And I started the K-12 group at Blackboard and brought the LMS into the K-12 space back in 1998 and 1999, and did that for a few years, and then eventually left and joined a uh, publishing uh, publishing company in professional development, and did a lot of professional development with teachers that are new to the profession and their mentors. But then the big jump came to where I left that after almost nearly 10 years. And it was just an absolutely fantastic time, from going to trade shows and hearing speeches and learning from, the Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe and Carolyn Tomlinson and Dylan William. I was always around these guys, and it was super exciting. And I had this opportunity to move to Bangkok, Thailand, to the International School of Bangkok, and return to the classroom, and use all these things that I had learned. So I went back into the classroom, and that's where I found the disconnect between ed tech and what was occurring in the classroom. So that kind of speeds you up to where I am today.
Wow, Mike. Well, that's interesting. I mean, your background, everything that you've talked about. I mean, we can definitely dive into a lot of that as well. That was a great introduction, and especially surrounding a lot of tech. So you've definitely been around a lot of tech. You've seen it from all sides, and of course, like you said, working with Blackboard and everything from the World Wide Web, T1 lines, and the way things were, the way things are now. So, and the experience that you've had, even also being internationally or being international is definitely something that is huge to have and being able to see things in different perspectives. So now let's talk a little bit, as always, just a little bit more of the origin story. So we'll dive in deep to Mike Rutherford's story and journey into education. And then, of course, we'll get into a little bit of the chat GPT, and then we'll definitely get into got learning because it's definitely I've been looking at the platform and obviously preparing for the show and everything, but definitely a lot of great things there that I would love for you to dive into as well. So as always, superhero origin story, Mike Rutherford. What does your or what did or what does I should say still does your education journey look like?
Well, my education journey, I'm from a family of educators, from my grandfather down to my mom, who was also a teacher and an author and an entrepreneur as well. Um, and I learned an absolute ton from her. I'm one of the few people in the world, for those special educators out there. I've had taken the Woodcock Johnson test somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20 times, because during my mom's master's program, she would use me as her test subject, for the Woodcock Johnson, which is a special education test, for students. And so, um, always wanted to be a teacher. I loved being around schools. I loved I loved social studies. I loved history, all those kind of things. And I had one of the greatest teachers in the world in eighth grade. Her name was Sandy Murray. Her name is now Sandy Lamb, but I still call her Sandy Murray. I was my eighth grade civics teacher, and I wanted to do that. And I ended up becoming an eighth grade civics teacher, because of that, which was super awesome. And the cool thing is that she actually gave me um, all of her files and lesson plans and everything, because she was leaving teaching to go be a mom. And so I took all of those and taught for a few years. And then when I left to go be an instructional technology coach, she went back into the classroom, and I returned all of her files and all my new files back to her. And we're still friends to this day. And she's just absolutely fantastic and was such a great role model, in regard to uh, teaching me to meet students where they are, and then lead them to new places. And it was one of the first classrooms I've ever been into where it was, the thing was, what do you think? And it was just like, it was angelic when we could actually, I learned to put words to those things, where she was actually letting us, do analysis, and we do learning conversations. And if we stated claims, she'd make us give evidence. So I very much enjoyed that, and really started learning, looking back at that, realizing she was giving us a lot of agency, to let us own our learning, and go in new places and follow passions, which I very much enjoyed. So that I really kind of folded that into my teaching as well. So been a lifelong educator. Absolutely love it. Been from the teacher side to the district administration side to the sales and marketing side to professional development side. I've actually been a librarian, and also a high school technology coordinator. Um, Going to Bangkok, I did both of those there. I did something that most people shouldn't do, which is be a yearbook coordinator, because they knew I'd working for a publishing company. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it, but everybody's like, "You volunteered for that?" And it's like, I did. And shout out to those yearbook coordinators out there, because that is not an easy job, at all. It's incredibly, incredibly hard. So my journey is that I'm a lifelong educator. I always have been. I'm still learning, and I always will be learning. There's always ways to get better. So I'm just excited. I'm excited to be in the field, and I'm glad that I picked this field.
Excellent. Well, Mike, that sounds wonderful. A lot of what you said just really resonates. And, I definitely agree. As maybe sometimes people may say, oh, that's such an overused phrase, but lifelong learner, I mean, I'm with you on that 100% and everything that you described as far as your experience. I can also, have a parallel to something that has occurred with me or throughout my journey as well and has really taken me into this, like these conversations and just having so much enthusiasm. And of course, even gaining more enthusiasm from amazing guests like yourself. When I hear your stories, it really pumps me up. And I hope that it also pumps up all our listeners and our viewers as well, because, there's so many great educators out there, such as yourself, that are just bringing that passion too. So, very inspiring. So let's talk a little bit about, I know that you mentioned a lot as far as bringing differentiation, bringing, just bringing the classes together, being able to meet every student where they are at. But let's take it back a little bit, because right now, talking about technology and how we immerse ourselves in technology, before we get into talking about gotLearning, which is the platform that you have created, there's a big buzz, going around this past week. And it started maybe about a week ago or maybe a little bit more when people are doing, their AI avatars. And so people are loading up their pictures and doing this AI avatar stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom, Chat GPT is out here. And to my amazement, I have seen a lot of teachers that are panicking. I've heard and seen a lot of comments and a lot of threads that I belong in and a lot of groups stating, well, we need to go back now to book and paper now and do those things. And I've been one of those that has just been a big proponent to say, hey, I'm here for all of this and I am excited about what this can do for the education landscape. So, as far as you having that tech background, Mike, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing this past week?
Well, I mean, obviously the biggest one is the Chat GPT, and the way it can answer your prompts and do it incredibly well. And you saw there was a big story in the Atlantic that came out, I think, almost a week and a half ago, saying that it was the end of the college essay, right? And then that's matriculated down to the K-12 space of it's going to change English, it's going to change this, it's going to change that. Just like um, you know, photo math will change mathematics. There's all kinds of different amazing tools that are out there. But I think you know, having been a more experienced educator now than a lot of people, this reminds me of some times that we've had in the past, and that is like the introduction of the World Wide Web in 1994, 95, 96, and 97, where we started putting modems in and having ISDN lines and T1 lines, and then all of a sudden our classrooms weren't limited by these four walls and just information from our library. We now could reach the world, and teachers, some of us, not all teachers, but some teachers were like, "It's over. How are we ever going to do anything?" Because kids are they go right to summative assessment and cheating. And it's like, whoa, this is we don't need to go there. Is that going to be a problem? It might. If it does, let's deal with it then. But this is a wonderful resource that really breaks down these walls that we all know. It led us to a whole bunch of different things. If I needed to show my students what the Gaza Strip looked like, I could do so in my social studies class, or we could pull up data from somewhere. It was just absolutely fantastic. Instead of sending someone down to go get the encyclopedia from the library or go ask the librarian, we had that right inside our classroom, and it didn't end the world there. And then the next thing so teachers innovated, education innovated. I think the second thing that also has happened during my teaching thing is the pandemic of 2020. We innovated there. Think about what teachers had to do. And it was one of the hardest, is way harder than dealing with the World Wide Web, of having to jump, go home and run classes via Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. That was incredibly hard. That was truly innovative because we had to change our methods to do so. And we did. And I think it wasn't hard, incredibly hard. But we survived. We're coming out of it. We're starting to thrive again. And I think that we're going to come up with this thing, that artificial intelligence in 2022 or 2023, where tools like chat GPT, are available. So we're going to have to innovate again. And that's going to mean we might have to look at, you know, really focusing on formative assessment and gathering learning as it's occurring and uh, kind of having running records. So we really get to know our students that much better at an individual level. We need to know that so that if their writing shows up or their math shows up or their science shows up and they're in middle school and it shows up at a graduate school level all of a sudden, we have something to kind of go back and look at. And so does the student. And we can come back and we can make that a learning experience. Let's not try to catch them being wrong. Let's teach them how to be right and know that those tools are out there. And there's actually some really good lesson plans that have come out in the last 2 weeks on how to use Chat GPT uh, in your classroom and to do analysis and look at what you can learn from it. And so, but if you really know your students, I think you're going to know if they use these kind of tools. And there may be a place in time that eventually down the road, once we've learned more about them, that we will use these tools as part of our repertoire, not only as teachers, but as students. But I think the analysis and that the analysis and communication and the transfer of knowledge is going to be so much more important now than a summative assessment. I think we're going to have to change that and look at our performance tasks and make sure and really heavily look at formative assessments so much more than we have in the past. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you on that. Some of the things that I have seen, from a lot of great friends of mine and a lot of, tech savvy folk that work in either in the industry as well, but are also teachers. When I heard that comment of somebody saying, well, actually, when I read that thread, when somebody said, oh, yeah, we're going to go back to books and paper now instead of using the tech, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, we're going backwards now. And what it did is it reminded me. Now, mind you, being an elementary student, I didn't have any technology at home. And at that time, having a personal computer was something huge and obviously out of our price range in our household. So I would get dropped off at the public library. And guess what? I would look at the encyclopedia. And guess what? I would open up the encyclopedia and here is my report,
Mhm.
kind of word for word, but try not to make it word for word. But because, no, I don't remember being taught that, you need to write this, this essay in this way and this form. It was just really like, don't copy it 110%, the way it is. So, but with these tools, like I said, and even playing with it myself, sometimes, the output seems great, but it's very in a passive voice. It's not very active. It all depends on how you're asking it. So in my thinking is like now you're going to have to teach students really how to really seek out research. Then number two, really filter out those answers or those responses to make sure that, the information is accurate. Also looking for citations, finding sources, finding a lot of those things. So there is so much room there for some great learning experiences and lessons to be able to use a tool like this and to continue to grow. I want to go back and reference a tweet that my great friend Tim Cavey posted on Teachers on Fire on Twitter. There's a picture there that he did something on Chat GPT, and the very last line really, sums it up for me, where it says, technology begins by making old work easier, but then it requires that the new work be better. So I think what you were saying too, to me, I believe in my thought process goes along the line as far as the formative assessment and assessing learning as it is happening, much so like I did in my classroom where everything was like on a project based. We were there working together. Students were working together in groups. They were able to present their learning and show it in different modalities and in the modalities that they felt comfortable with. But it was right then and there, just in time. But with a tool like this, I can see it as a resource to enhance what they're trying to say. They, much like you would by searching something up on Google or searching something up on Wikipedia. But there's definitely a lot of great lessons to be learned there. So I really like the way that you put that and you shared, that statement on what we can see and obviously as teachers what we can do. And I've just been telling people, try not to panic, it's going to be fine, and sooner or later they're going to put up a price on that, but they've given us a taste of what
Well,
is out there.
and it's not going anywhere. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, when the World Wide Web came out, it came out in small increments because you had to have a dial up. You know, you had a modem and you had to use TCP/IP to get out to a website. And so that was hard in the classroom. Now students can do that on their phones, or on their tablets, or even their Chromebooks, or what on their Macs, whatever they have instant access to it. So it's just going to happen a lot faster. And so I think we're going to have to innovate a lot faster. Maybe not as fast as we had to for COVID in 2020, where, you know, in March, all of a sudden we sit home with laptops and people are like, what's Zoom? You know, and they didn't even know what it was. And then all of a sudden maybe, you know, in 2 weeks, they're experts at it. It may not happen that fast, but it's definitely going to happen, where we have to start capturing learning as it's occurring, and providing feedback along the way, and showing that growth over time is going to be very, very important, especially on the formative assessment side. And I think we're probably going to have to push formative assessment much more than the transactional summative assessment that some some schools are, you know, especially universities, live on. You know, I teach, and then at the end of it, you know, it's that you know, teach, test, and hope for the best kind of thing that is just not going to work anymore.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you on that too, on that aspect as far as higher ed too, how they are affected by it. Even right now, at least this semester and a couple semesters back, I had the same professor for two classes. And what I loved about the change that I saw in her practice was, for example, this last semester, she actually went into ungrading. And so we were in charge of, okay, you need to give me a pitch. It was for transformational curriculum transformation, excuse me. And so, what is your pitch? And so she pretty much just gave us a rubric, and then she says, "Well, here's a rubric. Well, you can make your own rubric if you want, and you could be this kind of rubric or that kind of." So she gave you like complete freedom, but she was assessing, obviously, not only through the learning experience, but what we were bringing. And I must tell you that as unchallenging as it may seem for somebody to say, "Oh, ungrading," and then you get to grade yourself, and it was a you we're used to having teachers tell us what to do, exactly word for word, what you want us to submit at that given time. And for somebody that even in the higher ed space with some of my peers, a lot of them were just taken back and saying, "Well, what do you mean? Like I get a choice of how I learn?" And so I loved, like you mentioned, the phrase right now, and we'll go over that because it has to deal with got learning, which is that growth over time, from the beginning of that semester and my project was till the end, which was the last podcast, episode 152. I did ungrading, which I think is something that I absolutely love that practice. But I was able to see that growth over time in the classroom, just in time with those approaches of making everything, in a project based learning style. And then, of course, having a nice formative assessment, still being able to get the grades and have those learning artifacts as evidence of student learning. So I think that's something that's wonderful and great, and that I love that you mentioned there. So now let's talk a little bit about that growth over time and got learning. So tell me a little bit before we dive into really what this platform can do. I want to know the thought process. What moment in time or through your experience did the idea of coming up with this platform just come to you?
Okay. Well, one, going back to my story of being a teacher, and then being in the ed tech side, and then leaving and going to the private sector, but in education with Blackboard and also with Just Ask Publications. Um, I I learned a lot at those companies in regard to dealing with lots of different people, in what we call prospects or leads, and the conversations that you have with them and everything else. And so I did that for many years, and I learned a couple tools I learned about a couple tools, and I became an administrator of them. And one was what's called a CRM tool, which Salesforce is, and I was a big user of Salesforce. And then also marketing automation, where you can do certain interesting things with email and text and information that you provide to somebody by behaviors that they do, and the computer takes care of it. Well, when I returned to the classroom, I I was I had 135 kids. I had at the time basically two different preps. I was teaching English language arts and I was also teaching social studies. And it was incredibly hard to manage all of to meet the needs of each individual student, know where they were, remember the feedback that I provided to them, or capture that feedback and have it somewhere. Whether you were doing conferring with Lucy Calkins and the writers workshop or whatever it may be, your conferring notes, things that were put up in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, or it was handwritten in a notebook, or it was a conversation that you had, or it was a podcast that they turned in, or it was a Flipgrid video. All these kind of things, all about one student, maybe just in one week. And I remember sitting there realizing that I was spending so much time searching for learning evidence that I was doing more searching than I was providing feedback. And what I found, and in my mind, I was like, that's messed up. We should have tools that make us so much more efficient that we can have all of this stuff in one spot. And so how can I put all of this stuff in one spot so it'll give me more time to know my students better, but also allow me to provide more growth producing feedback? But I also wanted to be able to have this running record of seeing what feedback I had provided before. Because was I giving that person the same feedback the next time and the next time and the next time? And there was no growth happening. So how can we show growth over time? And so I looked for tools to do this. And this is back in 2015 when I was returned to the classroom at the International School Bangkok. And I was back in the classroom and had all these kids with all this information. And I was actually sitting in a teacher concerns meeting with students about students, where you say we have 8 or 10 kids we want to talk about. And I remember I was sitting there saying, oh, let's talk about this person. Okay. Oh, we're going to talk about them. Oh, you know what? Next time I'll bring some work evidence. I can put that together. And I'm going, we have access to that. We have access to that work evidence. It's somewhere in Google Drive. It's in our classrooms in a folder, or, even in a filing system that we may have. It may even be in one of the way that I did Google Drive, one of my new systems that I tried every 2 months. I'm going to color them this way. I'm going to name it this way. I'm going to try all we all have done it and we change them all the time. We always have a new one at the beginning of the year. I was like, something has to be different. And then I went out and looked for tools to help me with this, and I couldn't really find anything. The LMS wasn't about meeting an individual student. It was about really running a classroom, and providing an assignment to an entire class. It wasn't about tracking a student or capturing information about a student over time. So I'm going to go back to that Salesforce thing. And I realized, wait a second, I've done this before in the private sector. I was able to deal with 250,000 prospects, leads, and customers at Just Ask Publications. And when someone called, I could look up their record real quickly and remember the conversation, because it told me, remember the conversation from the previous year, and know that Susie from Dallas ISD, her husband had broken his arm while walking the dog. And I could ask about that. And she's like, how do you remember that? And it's like, good memory. It wasn't. I was using Salesforce where I had taken notes about our conversation. So she was part of this customer journey of that we had along this. And I knew that that's the same kind of thing I needed to solve in my classroom. How could I take all of that information from my students and put it in one place? And so for 3 days, I decided I was going to do this. It lasted for 3 days, because it became way too much. I was taking all the stuff that I was getting from kids, I was scanning it in, I was typing in notes, I was doing all these things. It was fantastic, except I was spending about 3 or 4 hours doing that outside of teaching, planning, coaching, all the different things that I was doing, and just being a human being. I was spending so much time to do it. I realized, okay, this is too much to put on the shoulders of a teacher. What we need to do is have a two-way conversational engine that allowed for us to communicate back and forth about their learning, just like we do face-to-face. We needed one online so that when a student would have a rough draft or had homework or trial and error of some sort, they could put it in a place, and then I can provide feedback, or there could be peer feedback, and they can do revisions, and we could have this kind of running record online, or learning conversation online, with all of this information in here. Going back to what I wanted before, which was I wanted to have a place where all of that learning evidence is in one place. So
I love
think
that,
I think
and
I'm hopefully you're still there.
yes, yes,
Looks like we're
no.
a little bit locked up.
Oh, okay, no, 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 I think we're good, we're good. Alright, can you hear me now? Are we good? Yes?
Are you good? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good, just making sure we're good.
I can
But
hear
y
you.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. So, yeah, I absolutely love all of
Okay,
that.
there we go.
Okay, and I think that was something so important is just the feedback, and, my first years of teaching, honestly, like I said, I didn't come through traditional college of education and going into teaching. It's coming from marketing to teaching, and I never really understood the power of feedback until it wasn't until I was in, elementary, and how powerful that is because at the time, in high school, it's like you give the students the grade back and then, they just, the paper, they just shove it back in their backpack and you forget about it because you got to
Yep.
move on. But it wasn't until elementary when I kind of honed in my skills a little bit more and saw the power of being able to give that feedback and then being able to give students the ability to also make any revisions. And then you've got peer feedback. That was all so powerful. And so I understand where you're coming from. And so now, this is where the platform comes to mind and you created this. So I know I have shared the website here as far as the links and everything so people can go ahead and check out. But tell us a little bit of what we will see here, through the use of this platform. What I loved is the explore feature that you have that I was exploring and playing around with this earlier where I can see it as a student, as a classroom teacher, educational specialist, school administrator, and as a parent even. So walk us through a little bit about that and how important that is too as well. And of course, the ultimate goal is growth over time. That's what we want to see.
Well, going back to, I originally had built this in Salesforce, as I mentioned. We're now no longer using Salesforce. We're using our own purpose built code, so we can build the tool. We built the tool the way we really wanted it to be. So now, if you go to gotLearning now, it's purpose built code. But as you mentioned, we found this out, and this was, I don't want to say, I'm going to say don't tell anybody, but it's going to be online, so it doesn't matter. Is Didn't plan this, it just happened, is that I added my math teacher that I was on uh, my middle school team to join what we were building. And so I added her to what was gotLearning version 1. And something really cool happened. And when I added her to it, I let her see my classes as well. And we had the same students because we were the same middle school team. And so what 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 the math teacher did is one day came running down the hallway after school and goes, "Oh my gosh, guess what I did?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "I needed to know why one of my students, and I won't name the name, who's absolute math whiz, did super unbelievable on all things math until they got to word problems. And then all of a sudden the floor fell out and the student was just struggling in a big way. And she said, I needed to come talk to you. I looked down, you were in class. I realized we didn't have the same lunch period because you know how schedules are. That day we didn't have the same lunch periods and we didn't have any periods off. So she could have emailed me. We could have met at the next student concern meeting, whatever it may be. But instead she goes, I just went over to your class on gotLearning and saw what the student was reading and the comments and the conversations you were having with them, and realized that student's at a third grade reading level in sixth grade math. And he needed help with the reading part. And so she's like, all I had to do was offer scaffolding. And then he went right back into knowing the math and showing the math real well. She was able to find that. And so it was a really cool thing of saying, wait a second, we need to be able to see the 360-degree thing of the student and incorporate me as a social studies and English teacher to see what's going on in math and in science and in dance and in PE and in band. But then once that occurred, then we grabbed our special education teacher, and she was like, okay, this is awesome. I want all of the classes for each of my students so I can see their growth over time in one place. And it was like, wait a second, why is our technology built right now with these metaphorical walls that don't allow this to happen? And we knew that this is a time that we needed to break down those walls and add everybody. Let's get the counselors in. Let's get the school administrators in so that they can see qualitative learning evidence and see growth over time and also participate. And then, of course, believing in parents as being partners, allowing parents to come in and see not grades, attendance, and behavior, but let's see what's really going on learning wise and giving them a way to see qualitative learning, to see the feedback that was given, the revisions, all those kind of things really kind of changed. And it really was transformative in regard to how we were communicating with each other about a student. Now, one very important thing is that the student can see all of this as well. So just think about the executive functioning we have of having everything in one spot by still using your favorite ed tech tools, whether it's Google Docs or, Google Classroom or Flipgrid or whatever, Khan Academy, all of those things you can drop right into learning conversations. And so it's incredibly process neutral along with content neutral. And also technology neutral. We wanted to make it so that each teacher did something that they could do it the way that they wanted to. And we learned that as well, because when I built it for the math teacher, she didn't like it and she wanted it another way. And then the other English teacher was teaching the same thing as me, didn't like it that way, the way that I had it set up. And then all of a sudden I realized I was building things for everybody. And that's part of the reason why we went away from and built our own code base so we can build it so that we could be process neutral and allow teachers to teach the way that they want to, and even do it and make it different at each student level, depending on where their students were.
That is so powerful. Just the way that you implemented all of that, from the teacher to the admin to the counselors to the special ed teacher to the parents. And I think that's something that is so important. And, I wish, when I was still in the classroom, more than 4 years ago, and then those last years where I really honed in my skills, because it seems it would be it would fall right in line with the way that I taught because it was a lot of projects, a lot of learning artifacts and to me, it was always that evidence of learning that if I went into an RTI meeting, if I went into a 504, normally, sometimes teachers may go in there and say, or the parent is there, well, why is the student not doing well? And the only answer sometimes would be, it's like, well, they're just not passing the test. Okay, well, what exactly is it specifically that they may be missing? Well, they're just not passing. They just need to study more. When I went in, it was, well, let me show you. Let me pull up the students' assignments that they have, that they've turned in Google Classroom, and let me show you the artifacts. And then I came in with that evidence. So the fact that the RTI committee or the 504 committee was able to see, wow, this is where the student was at fourth grade and where they started at the beginning of the year, and you're telling me that this is where they are now, and they were able to see visually that growth because you had evidence of that learning and then the parent was able to see that. That's something so important. So I'm loving, what you have here because it gives you power to make those decisions, whether it's by teacher and student or at the admin level, still seeing what we can do together as a team. So we're on the same page. And that's really exciting to me to be able to have access to all of that and just, really meeting the students where they're at.
Yeah. Well, yes. And like you said, the growth over time aspect is key. And the parent teacher conferences were absolutely spectacular in regard to, because we had student led conferences and we never talked about grades, didn't talk about attendance, didn't talk about behavior. It was the student that put together their own, what they wanted to show. Here is where I am as a writer in August. Here is where I am in November. And this is what I've learned. In one key, and this happened a ton of times, but one really cool story was a very high powered attorney was sitting next to his daughter. And the daughter was talking about how she now knew how to write persuasively. And what she was writing for here was this, but she stated claims and gave evidence, but used persuasive language to do this. And you saw the fathers just looking at her going like, you, you can, you can do that. I, I want to hire you for my law firm right now. I have employees that can't do that. It's like, and you saw this beanie from the daughter that they hadn't had this conversation before because it was usually about grades or behavior or attendance. This was about what she was learning. And it was one of those teaching moments that you were just like, oh my God, I love what I do. And it was all facilitated by the student because they had access and they had put everything together and that they made this. And she was able to, she had, she owned her learning and talked about how she had grown as a writer and what she could do. And it was one of the coolest things that had ever happened to me as a teacher. And it was just fantastic, fantastic days. I really liked parent teacher conferences where before they used to just be exhausting, still exhausting, but exhilarating and really, really just an awesome experience.
Awesome. Well, that's great. That's such a wonderful story. So, Mike, I've been sharing the link here, in the chat, and of course, that'll be also in the show notes so everybody can get access to Got Learning. So, let's say that tomorrow, or even tonight, somebody that may be rewatching or listening to this, they go to gotlearning.com. What is it that they will get to access if they go in and there's a sign up for free? What does that entail?
Well, if you go to Got Learning and sign up for free, you get what's called the free pro teacher account, which gives you a your own classroom that you can populate with a sample class with real students work in anonymized, of course, but it's with fake names. And you can play around with the class, and you can also add your own classes and see the platform. And now, what's really cool about this is that you can also, once you start building your own classes, you also can invite your administrator to be part of your class. And we are about to add in the next couple of weeks, we're going to add where you can add two other teachers to your group. So you can have a team of teachers. So whether you have a grade level team or a middle school team, and you want to add and share some of those kind of things and still have like those kind of things I had with my math teacher and my special education teacher, you're going to be able to do that as a team, writing Got Learning. So you can see each other's students and see that whole picture of the student while providing ongoing feedback and personalizing learning and all those kind of things. And of course, showing growth over time. So you're able to do that right from the website.
Excellent. Well, I'm really excited about that. And like I said, I was playing a little bit with it earlier today and yesterday as well. But thank you so much for sharing this amazing work because it really is exciting. And I mean, like I said, this is the whole point of the show, really like this conversation, connecting educators, creators one show at a time. The fact that you as an educator created a solution to something that you were seeing and now sharing that solution with many others that may think the same way and want that evidence there. And of course, you want to include everybody within that learning process as well is something that's very powerful. So I'm really excited and highly encourage all our audience members and anybody that's going to be catching this show, please make sure you check out gotlearning.com. And then that way you can go ahead and play around with those features and see how you can sprinkle it onto what you all already doing it great. So thank you, Mike, for sharing. But Mike, before we go, obviously we're kind of getting close to wrap up time, but we always love to end our show with these final three questions. So here we go, Mike. Question number one before we wrap up is in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
My edu kryptonite, saying the thing that drives me craziest, if you will, or
Yep.
I would have to say compliance. Anything, things that are based on a compliance-based classroom instead of a competency-based classroom. One that's done about, hey, this is a forced march. Everybody must do this, and you must do it this way. That is one of my biggest absolute pet peeves. Is a completely compliant classroom that doesn't have a place for students for voice and choice, and is it's just about control and compliance. Is my biggest edge of kryptonite.
All right. Good answer. Good answer. All right. My question number two, if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
I would say um, all students can learn. And why would I do that? Because that's one of the three things that I was taught by my new teacher mentor, Paula Rutherford, my mom, about what I needed to have in my classroom is one of three things. One was all students can learn. Um, and then to also tell the kids that all students can learn. Two, you can do it. And three, I won't give up on you. And those three things I have used not only in the classroom, but as a parent, as a athletic coach, as all kinds of different things, and just setting the right culture. So I'm going to say I want those three things on the billboard, not just one.
Excellent. No, that's great. And I was going to say, we can fit those three in there and it would be a magnificent billboard for sure. All right, Mike, last question. Let's say that this was the Got Learning podcast with host Mike Rutherford and I was your guest. What would be one question you'd like to ask me?
Okay, let's go back to the beginning conversation that we had about AI and chat GPT. And that was, what would you do? You're an instructional technology coach, which I know you are. And you are working with a group of teachers who are absolutely freaking out about AI, and they do want to go back to just books and pencils and paper. What's your way of talking them down, and how would you go about doing so?
Sure, absolutely. My number one thing is, number one, the technology is always going to be ever evolving. Like we need to move forward. But what I would do is having the relationship that I have with a lot of them there in the district is they were some of the ones that would push back a lot on the tech. And but especially when we jumped into pandemic, now they feel a little bit more comfortable. So what I would do is really just to make them at ease is say, hey, let's open this up. Let's check it out. Let's play around with it. Let's get clicky with it, get to see it, because I think the more familiar they are with the tool as well and see maybe the type of answers and then maybe apply it, make it applicable to whatever subject area that they are or content area that they teach. Let's go ahead and pop in, some questions. Let's see what it gives you. And then that way they can be familiar with that tool. Now, again, just to show them that familiarity that number one, you're still in control of what you put in, and then it's gonna give you an output, but just to build that comfort level and really start thinking and saying, "Okay, if I am teaching this way, what can I do different where the student will not just get a canned response from this, GPT program, but how can I maybe assess it or give a question that they would need to dive in a little bit deeper than just the blanket response that may come. So it's really, let's dive in, let's jump
Sure.
in, let's experiment, and let's get familiar with it. Because right now, I think it's more of that familiar of being unfamiliar with the unknown. And a lot of teachers just panicking, saying, oh, the AI is going to take over our jobs and AI is going to do this. It's like, no, let's see how we can leverage this and just get better at what we do. And I think that's really what's going to happen. That as educators, we're going to have to know these tools better to leverage that to really push education forward, because this isn't going to go anywhere and it's probably only going to get better. So, what can we do now to start working with our students and even ourselves to make everything a little bit better? So, that would be my approach there.
It reminds me of. Did you ever watch Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Okay, remember how he misquoted Walt Whitman in the
Yeah.
darts game? It was an incorrect quote. I thought it was Walt Whitman. Looked it up. It's not. But it's the whole thing about be curious, not judgmental.
Hmm.
And man, I love that quote. And that's basically what you're saying is, hey, let's be curious about it before we judge and say, you know, the roof's going to fall in on us at schools and the walls are going to collapse. Everything's
Yeah.
done. We have to go back to, slates or whatever, or chalkboards. Yeah. I love the fact that you're saying, let's be curious
Yeah.
and not
uh,
judgmental. So
exactly. So, that would
I
be
had to
number
throw a
one.
Ted Lasso quote in there at some point.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it.
Fantastic.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for this great evening, this great chat that we had. It was just amazing. And I always feel refreshed and re energized when I get to speak to a guest. So the fact that I get to do it on, not on Saturday and doing it during the week, that even pumps me up even more. But thank you so much for the passion that you shared, your authenticity, your genuineness, and of course, how you came up with Got Learning. So, educators, anybody out there in the education space, please make sure that you go to gotlearning.com. Make sure that you check that out. And also, please make sure that you stop by our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this episode and 152 other great episodes with amazing educators that you can connect with. and find something that you can sprinkle on to what you already do great. As always, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for making my EdTech life what it is today. And also, please don't forget to visit our merch store where we've got some great designs. You can pick yourself up a hoodie. Conference season is around the corner after December. You've got January, February. You've got some nice conference wear that you can pick up here and support our show. So make sure you stop by our store. And as always, my friends, from the bottom of my heart, until next time, don't forget, make sure that you stay techie. We'll see you next time.